Seattle Hempfest, kicking off the Hemposium tent with the 22 Too Many panel about veterans of cannabis. We have 4 excellent panelists today. Each of them have a particular niche that's quite different from the other ones, whether it's geographic or the scale at which they work or their background. So we've got some awesome folks in the panel today. But first, I want to remind everyone in the audience that Seattle Hempfest is entirely volunteer run, and your average donation from folks is about $1. So if you just throw in 5, that you've donated 5 times more than your average person. And Seattle Hempfest is down the stage this year, so it needs all the support you can get. So my name is Dr. Dominic Corva. I am the Executive Director and Social Science Research Director of the Center for the Study of Cannabis and Social Policy. And with us today, we're going to go, we're not in order here. I think I remember the order that everybody wanted to go in, but it's my pleasure to have 2 new friends today on the panel. I just met Ellen and Aaron backstage, and I'm pretty excited to hear them talk. But obviously Patrick and Michael have been around for a while in the Seattle area, and may be familiar with some of you in the audience. So what the format today is, we're going to get 5 minutes from each person, and then we're going to open up for questions and conversation. So the one thing I want to say about the veterans panel here today is that this is a subject that's not new to cannabis. That in many ways, it was the veterans as much as it was the hippies that brought cannabis consumption to the United States after the Vietnam War. Dennis Peron's famous description of cannabis as an anti-war drug comes from the perspective of a Vietnam veteran who came back and became a hippie, actually. A lot of veterans did that. A lot of veterans did not become hippies, but nonetheless, whether they knew it or not, they were self-medicating for PTSD. And there were a lot of them, and they probably reached more different corners of American culture than I'd say even the hippies did at the time, because they came from middle America, they came from conservative households. So this issue is not new, and it's very exciting to me to be able to introduce you to this panel so you can see what the politics actually of cannabis and war, or being a war veteran, are today. But remember, this is part of a long trajectory. It's a key, critical part of cannabis history and culture. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to our first panelist, which is Michael Krawitz. He's been a friend of mine for several years, and he works at the global level in particular, advocating for veteran access to cannabis. So I'm going to start you off, Michael Krawitz. 5 minutes.
Hello, everyone. I just kind of run with the note that you just started with. I'm really proud of the article that I wrote for High Times magazine. The High Times, I think it was May issue, was dedicated to veterans, and we had like 6 different veterans articles in there. And I got to write the quote-unquote anchor article, and I was really happy and proud of that. And I tied it together. I kind of wove it through, what I consider to be the veterans' kind of place. And most people don't realize, the veterans are there in many cases. Like Jack Herer, so well known to this crowd and this venue for so many years, still an icon even after his passing. Jack Herer, military veteran, and Dennis Peron, kind of a pioneer, groundbreaker for medical marijuana in so many ways, and lesser known as a military veteran. So yeah, the veterans are there. I really appreciate you commenting on that. And I think it's worth noting too, I think this is actually the first panel that we've had at Hempfest that's all veterans. It's actually a veterans panel, not just dedicated. We've had a couple now dedicated to veterans this year. Yeah. So thank you Hempfest, and thank you Dominic, thank you everybody. So I think what I'll do is just give you kind of a quick overview of where we're at. I come to kind of give you from the field, advisories. These annual little visits to Hempfest are really special to me, and I do get out to the international level, I do get to the national level, and both of those are very, very different vibe than when I can come home to Hempfest and be with my friends and family and smoke a legal joint. It's like really, really beautiful. Thank you for that. So where we're at right now, we've got kind of a lot of different irons in the fire, and what veterans have basically come into is the medical marijuana side, I guess you'd say. We've gotten into a little bit with legalization. We've had a veterans committee and a veterans kind of component to each of the, including Washington State and Oregon, Colorado. We've had veterans working and try to legalize as well, but that's just more of a small veterans committee. As a veterans population, we're working on medical access to cannabis. We got a VA medical marijuana policy passed in 2010, and that was updated in 2011. It's really just a simple policy that just says that if you're using medical marijuana under a state medical marijuana program, you're not to be harassed, in some way that it might seem like you would be for using an illegal, marijuana while you're on the VA property. So they also made it clear that the DEA had actually threatened them, and they were not allowed to recommend or otherwise fill out the forms for the veteran to participate in the state medical marijuana programs. And that's what we've been working on ever since 2011, essentially trying to give the doctors the right to fill out the forms or recommend cannabis. And if you understand how medical marijuana works and how this whole thing unfolded, that's a free speech issue. It's your free speech interaction with the doctor that produces the quote-unquote recommendation, which is not a quote-unquote prescription, would be quote-unquote illegal. And you can take the quotes off because you're dealing with the DEA here. It's really illegal. So anyway, we have gotten pretty far down that road. We've got a Veterans Equal Access Act in Congress. We've got a CARES Act, also has a line in it that would actually do this and make it very, very clear that the doctors have this free speech, that would be able to do this. And for us, I think it's really important to make this clear that this is kind of an educational program. This is about making sure that the doctors inside the VA, which are treating millions upon millions of veterans, understand that cannabis is there, understand that cannabis is possibly an effective treatment, and to step-by-step incrementally get them to the point where eventually they'll be able to prescribe it out of the pharmacy, which is where we want to be and where we're heading, eventually. So right now, we're trying to get this new VA medical marijuana policy out. It expired, but they actually have made it very clear that just because it expired, it didn't go away. It still stays in force until it's actually replaced or rescinded. So it's still sticking around, and we're really kind of waiting for this update. They think that they can make it clear that doctors have free speech, but yet can't fill out those forms. So that's kind of a magic trick to us. We want to see how they do that. So we really are trying to focus on that. We're also focusing on them correcting their website. If you go to the VA right now and you look at post-traumatic stress, Patrick will talk a little bit about. We got added as a condition in Washington State. We've also got it added in almost every other state. There's only a couple states now out of all 29. There's only like 2 states left. If New York finally signs this year, there'll be only 2 states left that don't have post-traumatic stress out of the 29 modern post-traumatic Prop 215 laws. We're really proud of that. It's been an incredible progress. And right now we're looking at a website that really it's almost like from the Stone Age at the VA. So we're not just going to demand that they replace it. We're going to give them the information to replace it with, and we're going to give that to them. We've got a forum coming up on the 13th in DC. Anybody's invited. That's in the area. If you know anybody that representatives in Congress, anybody you want to talk to, try to get them to DC on 13th of September. We're having a veterans forum with the VA. We're bringing in veterans from around the country to talk back and forth. And we'll be talking about the VA website. We'll be talking about some of these things and the progress that the VA hasn't been able to participate in. They've made it clear that the veterans are allowed to use medical marijuana, but this is the first real connection we've had talking about the progress is how it's actually worked for vets, and it's been incredibly successful. You guys have seen the success with access to cannabis. So before I take off the mic, I just want to say hi to Dr. Sisley, who's in Reno right now at the American Legion conference. We've got the American Legion. It's like the biggest veteran service organization in the country now, stumping for us up on Capitol Hill, trying to get some of this reform going. Like I said, the veterans are on one voice on this in reforming medical access to cannabis. We're really coming together, millions and millions of us at this point. It's really, really powerful. So hi to Dr. Sisley out there in Reno, the guys from Vets out there, and I think that's everything I wanted to say. Really love you guys, and thanks for having me.
Next up, we have Ellen Brown, who I just got a little bit of her biography backstage, a very interesting one. After coming out of the military, she went to Humboldt and worked in pretty much every part of the cannabis industry you can in that area of the country, which is, of course, pretty much the main area of the country for cannabis. And then she moved back to the Northeast. Are you in New Hampshire or are you in
Massachusetts?
In Massachusetts. So her activism back there is actually regional though as well. I'll let her tell you all about it though. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you very much. My name is Ellen Taylor Brown, and I am with the New England Veterans Alliance, and I am also the founder of Sensimia Seminars. And once I got out of the service, and after I came home from California in 2012, Massachusetts was in the process of getting our first medical marijuana program. And I was home, and I'm happy to say that I voted yes on question 3, which was our medical marijuana program. And in this program, we are allowed to cultivate for ourselves, which is really important. So a lot of what I do is education on teaching like a man how to fish. I want everyone to know about their endocannabinoid systems. I want everyone to understand the difference between an indica and sativa and why you would grow what, when, and what would be the best for you. So I'm looking to teach everyone about how to pick strain specific and how to take care of themselves, how to take care of their family, and then not only how to take care of yourself, but how to really understand it to the point where you can go ahead and educate the next person. So that's why I started Sensimia Seminars, so that way I could go and educate the next person. And I've had a lot of great proof of concept with my students because it's really a beautiful thing to watch, teaching somebody how to make edibles or how to grow cannabis, and then getting a text or getting a message months, years later saying, hey, remember that candies class? I was able to give that to somebody that was terminally ill and it really helped them in their final days. Or, hey, I was able to grow and I took all my excess medicine and I gave it to somebody who needed it. And I'm like, yes, that's my student. So that's what brings me a lot of pride and a lot of joy. And working with the New England Veterans Alliance, what we've done is we've really focused on the region of New England and how do we make a difference there? What are the needs? What are we seeing? What are veterans asking for? And they're asking for education. So we do a lot of classes for free for veterans, and we also hold monthly support meetings in different states so that way we can go to the veterans, they can come to us. But also what we do, which is really important and that everyone should be involved in, is activism and being active in your state and local legislation. You want to make sure that laws are passed and they're going to be favorable, especially towards veterans. New Hampshire was one of the last states to allow for post-traumatic stress disorder to be added as their list of qualifying conditions for their medical marijuana program. And the New England Veterans Alliance was there, and we testified on behalf of how positive it would be to have PTSD added for those veterans that weren't able to get any medicine or didn't know that there was an alternative to opiates and that they could use cannabis. And I'm proud to say that as of March this year, New Hampshire added PTSD as a qualifying condition. And that's the work of so many people. That's the work of the veterans speaking up. That's the work of their family members speaking up. That's the work of just people having the conversation. And with this 22 here in Seattle, what I've seen is your veteran organization is being very loud, very proud, and very active. And over on the East Coast, you know, we're liking, we're sharing, and we're talking about it. And they're doing the same. So we have a really great veteran community. And I think what I always like to drive home is just the importance of each person teaching every single person that they come in contact with. Don't be shy, don't be afraid. You never know if you tell somebody that you use medical marijuana or you've seen it be beneficial or you're even a recreational user, the whole conversation could change. Oh, I haven't done that since the 70s, or I have somebody I know in my family who has cancer and they've been wondering about cannabis. What do you know? What are some resources? You are that resource. You're the best resource for every single person you know. And if you're for cannabis, the way I'm for cannabis, which I know you are because you're here, you want to make sure that you're able to give them the resources to the veteran organizations, to the organizations that are going to be able to get you to Dr. Sue Sicily. I've heard all about her. She's fantastic. So finding out what your regional organizations are, finding out what your national organizations are, and just not backing down, knowing that you're on the right side of what it is we're doing, and we need to break the stigma, and the only way to break the stigma is to break the silence and say, I am a cannabis user, I am a medical marijuana user, and that'll help change it.
Thank you, Ellen. The theme seems to be continuing the process of popular education. You have to continue to educate each other. You've got to educate everyone else as well. Our next speaker, Patrick Seifert, is a good friend of mine, based out of Olympia. Those of you who are in Washington State might be familiar with him and his 22 Too Many organizing. Patrick, I'm just delighted to be able to introduce you to the crowd.
Thank you very much. So I got a lot of people, it won't take me very long, but I've got to say thank you to Seattle Hempfest for putting this together, this all veteran panel. Amazing. Please give it up for Seattle Hempfest for doing that. And there's we have over 100 years of veteran activism that has come together for this weekend. And we have Jose that has come in from out of town. We have support from Sunshine Cannabis, Sugar Leaf, Namaste, Vapes for Vets, Weed Rather, Randy, I can't thank you enough, brother. Thank you for all that you do for 22 Too Many. Jesse coming into town, Kat Jeter and Carrie, just to name a few, and Mike, my mentor. It's an honor to be able to sit here next to him. What I want to bring to talk to you guys today about is something that we're working on bringing to not only Washington State, but the entire United States. The problem we are facing right now is the 20 to 22 veteran suicides a day. We know in Washington State, in every state that has a medical cannabis program, that those suicide rates are lower. So we believe that if you deny a veteran in Texas or in Alabama or whatever these states are that don't have any medical programs at all, deny them access to this plant with those numbers going on, that is unethical. And we're going to bring that fight to them under ethics. We believe that we can win that fight. We want to put a billboard in Texas that says, if you lost a penny of your benefits because of cannabis use, call this 1-800 number. And we're going to bring the fight to them. Listen, we have got to get access to this plant to every veteran in the United States. It's a travesty that there's still not access for every veteran. 22 Too Many is proudly responsible for getting PTSD added to the list of qualifying conditions here in Washington State. 2 years ago, we went up to the Capitol. We presented Senator Hobbs with a bill, a PTSD bill. We begged him to run that bill to the end without adding anything to it, because that's what killed the bill in years prior. And he made that promise. And the one thing that they did add in the end was TBI, which was a blessing, right? And so PTSD and TBI are now on the list of qualifying conditions. And thanks to Dr. Vivian Blanco, I was the very first patient in Washington State to receive an authorization for PTSD. So what is 22 Too Many plan on doing? Two things we have coming up next session. We want to add phantom limb to the list of qualifying conditions. Listen, the list of qualifying conditions in Washington State is sad. There are states that have like twice as many things wrong, qualifying conditions, on their list of qualifying conditions, and we don't have very many, and that list should be as long as we want that list to be. Definitely we want to add phantom limb to that list of qualifying conditions. And also in Illinois, if you're not familiar with Illinois, there's an Illinois Veterans Clause that they have going on there. A veteran can take his medical records from the VA, go to the health department, put it on the table. If it's on the list of qualifying conditions, they get their authorization for free. And so that's something else that we're going to try and bring to this state as well. A veteran should not have to pay for his authorization, and he definitely shouldn't have to pay for his cannabis. Listen, a perfect example is Randy. He's in our organization right here. Listen, he is 100% unemployable. He can't work or he'll lose his money, right? He takes last year he spent over $10,000 on cannabis because he chooses cannabis over pharmaceuticals. Yeah. That money, he's a single father. He has to spend $10,000 of that money on cannabis. That should be paid for him. He shouldn't have to take the money he's meant to live on, right, and use it for his medicine. He chooses cannabis. He will not take anything from the VA. He chooses cannabis, and that should be paid for. In closing, please come by the Veteran VIP tent this year. Also, for the first time in Seattle Hempfest history, we have a VIP/Zape zone for veterans. It gets pretty packed here, absolutely. It gets pretty packed here, and if a vet gets triggered or anything, we have a safe zone for them now. There'll be fans, refreshments, all sorts of stuff going on down there. You have to come down and see. You have to be a veteran to come into that tent. It's at the far north end. You can't go any further, right by the big white silos. You can't. If you go past those, you went too far. And thank you very much for your time. Everybody that supports, if you ever come across a veteran in need, help them, please. If you know a veteran, go home tonight and call them and let them know that they're loved, special, and important. You never know. We're losing 20 to 22 a day, you guys. That could be the moment that you save that veteran's life. Love and light.
Thank you, Patrick. And finally, another new friend, Aaron Augustis. Had a chance to talk to backstage not too long ago. Incredibly compelling personal story. He was in the first wave, basically, in Iraq. So I'll let him tell it, but he's a combat veteran. He was there at a particularly historical moment in history and place, and we are honored to have you with us today, Aaron.
Thank you. My name is Aaron Augustis, and I'm from California. I started the Veterans Cannabis Group last year down there, particularly because of my experience in Iraq and my use of cannabis medicinally for PTSD. I was in the Army for 5.5 years. I joined in June of 1998. When 9/11 happened, I knew we were going to go to war, which we did about 1.5 years later. And I crossed the border of Iraq on Easter Day 2003. So I was just a couple of weeks behind the initial invasion. And I ended up staying in Mosul, Iraq, which is North Iraq, for 7 months in 2003. And at that point in time, I was already a sergeant in the military. I served 5.5 years of active duty. That was the tail end of my enlistment. And when I got back out of the military, I definitely underestimated the transition into civilian life. Because at that point in time in my life, you're only, my entire adult life was in the military. From 18 to 23 years old, all of my adult life was in the military, and then followed off by a deployment to a combat zone. And then literally 45 days after being in Iraq, coming home, and then going back to California and being a civilian, trying to readjust. So I ended up doing community college. I signed up for community college about 3 weeks after being back and said, oh, no problem, I'm gonna go to school full time. I just went to Iraq, and that didn't work out very well for me right away because I had not decompressed yet. And at that point in time, I ended up dropping all of my classes, and I just used cannabis, and I didn't do anything for the entire rest of the year until I finally started school that fall, where I went on and got my degree in corporate finance and moved on. But that was a period of transition which I think that a lot of veterans are missing, is the transition period, coming back from the military, especially if you were in a combat zone, and then trying to figure out what your next step in life is. What the military doesn't tell you, and what is not really talked about, is your brain development as a human being, especially for males. You're not fully developed in your brain until you're 25 years old. So if you're 18 or 23 like I was, and you're in a combat zone, this is a heightened level of experience for a long period of time. It's not like a car accident where it's a very quick moment in time that can be very traumatic. This is where you're actually living in an environment. Imagine this is a compound, and the people on the other side of the train tracks are your enemy, and you're always living in that heightened state of awareness. So your brain is developing, your neurons are developing different pathways because you're not even fully developed as a human being. So when you come back, you are you're different, physically, and that's something that is not really understood. I didn't understand it until I started to talk to the VA 10 years after I got out of the military, which again leads back to, I started the Veterans Cannabis Group to try to reach out to other veterans to see if I was, hey guys, am I the only one smoking this much cannabis? And is there anybody else out there that kind of has had these behaviors since being back from Iraq? And I know that I'm still intelligent and smart person and I can get good grades, but sometimes I go a little, can become emotional or be triggered by different things. And what you have to understand is that you're having a normal experience to an abnormal situation. And so starting the Veterans Cannabis Group, connecting with the other veteran advocacy groups out there and across the nation is something that I think is very important. Like you were saying, Ellen, is coming together. One thing that we've been able to do with the Veterans Cannabis Group is to start these conference call updates, so we can all kind of dial in and speak wherever you are in the world. You can call in, and it's for us as veterans to be able to communicate across the nation. So I encourage you guys to check out our conference calls to stay up to date. They're recorded and posted on the website on veteranscannabisgroup.com. But I have a lot more to talk about. I'll be here all weekend, and so thank you very much for having me here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Aaron. Give it up for Aaron. All right, so we actually probably have about 8 minutes for questions from the audience. And